Welcome to Plot Echo Audio. Tonight, settle into a quiet place and allow yourself to be carried into a story about distance, memory, and the kind of love that does not disappear simply because two people lose their way. This is the story of Mara Ellis and Daniel Rowan, and of two letters that spent 8 years waiting for the truth. Mara returned to Bellwether Cove on a Thursday evening, beneath a sky the color of wet slate. Rain moved across the windshield in silver lines, and beyond it, the sea appeared and vanished between the dark shapes of the cliffs. She had not driven this road in 8 years, yet her hands remembered every curve. At the top of the hill stood her grandmother's house, narrow and white, with blue shutters and a porch that leaned slightly toward the ocean. The garden had grown wild around it. Lavender crowded the path. Ivy climbed the walls. A rusted wind chime turned slowly in the rain. Mara parked beside the old stone wall and remained in the car for a moment. She had come to empty the house, sign the papers, and return to the city before the memories had time to settle around her. That was the plan. Plans, she had learned, were often just wishes wearing sensible clothing. Inside, the house smelled of cedar, dust, and the faint lavender soap her grandmother had always used. Every room held a version of Mara's childhood. The blue teacups, the clock that ran 3 minutes fast, the narrow staircase where Daniel had once sat beside her until dawn, whispering about the life they would build when they were old enough to choose it. She had not allowed herself to think his name in years. Daniel Rowan. At 18, he had been quiet and observant, the sort of person who noticed when someone was cold before they said a word. He sketched buildings in the margins of his school books and could repair almost anything with patience and a small screwdriver. Mara had been restless. She wanted cities, crowded theaters, train stations, and rooms filled with people who did not know her history. Daniel had wanted the sea, old houses, and a life that felt rooted. They had believed those differences could be overcome. Then, one summer night, they had disappeared from each other's lives. Mara spent the first hour in the sitting room, sorting papers into boxes. The second hour took her into the kitchen. Near midnight, carrying a stack of old account books, she noticed a loose board beneath the attic stairs. The board lifted with a soft wooden sigh. Beneath it was a small cedar box tied with a faded blue ribbon. Mara recognized the box immediately. Her grandmother had kept pressed flowers in it, along with photographs and small objects that seemed meaningless until someone explained their history. She carried it upstairs. The attic was cold. Rain tapped steadily against the roof, and the single bulb above her cast more shadow than light. Mara placed the box beside a window and untied the ribbon. Inside were dried lavender stems, a brass key, 2 photographs, and an envelope. The envelope was yellow with age. Her name was written across the front in a handwriting she knew before she consciously recognized it. Mara. She touched the ink with one finger. On the back, beneath the seal, was a date from 8 years earlier, the night she had left Bellwether Cove. For a long time, she could not open it. Then she remembered the reason she had come home. The house was no longer her grandmother's. The past was no longer powerful. Whatever the letter contained belonged to another version of herself. Mara broke the seal. Mara pressed the page against her chest. Her grandmother had never told her this. She had said Daniel was not coming. She had said he had found someone else. Mara had believed her,
because heartbreak made every cruel explanation sound reasonable. The final lines of Daniel's letter were written more faintly than the rest. If I am wrong, and if some small part of you still remembers me kindly, then know this: I never stopped loving you. I only stopped believing that I was wanted. I will be at the lighthouse tomorrow at sunset. If you do not come, I will understand. Daniel. Mara sat on the attic floor until the rain stopped. At sunrise, the town looked almost unchanged. Fishing boats moved slowly beyond the harbor, and gulls circled the market square as if nothing in the world had ever been lost. Mara folded the letter and placed it in her coat pocket. She needed answers. The lighthouse stood at the end of a narrow road above the sea. By the time Mara reached it, the clouds had opened and sunlight rested across the water. A man stood on the steps with a coil of rope in his hands. He turned when he heard her car door close. Daniel had changed, but his gaze was the same. Careful, direct, impossible to mistake. For several seconds, neither of them moved. Then Daniel said, "Mara." Her name sounded different in his voice than it had in her memory. Softer, more fragile. "I found your letter," she said. He looked at the envelope in her hand. "I wondered if your grandmother had kept it." "You knew?" "I gave it to her the morning after you left. She said she would make sure you received it. She told me you had moved on. I thought you had." Mara wanted to be angry. Anger would have been easier. Instead, she felt tired. "I waited for you at the station," she said. "I know." "No, you don't. I waited until the last announcement. I thought you had decided I was not worth stopping." Daniel's face tightened. "I was at the station. Evelyn came to me before the train arrived." The truth was not dramatic. There had only been two young people, frightened and proud, listening to the wall voice at the worst possible moment. Mara told Daniel she wanted him to come after her, while Daniel admitted he wanted her to ask him to follow. They realized they had been good at loving each other, but terrible at explaining what they needed. Daniel then showed her a second letter, written in Mara's handwriting. It said, "Daniel, I am leaving because I think you have already chosen not to come with me. I wish you had told me yourself. I wish I could hate you, but I cannot. If you ever wonder whether I loved you, the answer is yes. I loved you enough to leave before you could leave me." Mara looked up and whispered, "I never sent this." Daniel said he found it inside a book she had once given him. They both understood that 8 years had been lost to silence, pride, and a misunderstanding. They did not fall instantly into each other's arms. The years between them could not be erased by one conversation. Instead, Daniel invited Mara inside the lighthouse. He showed her the restored lantern room, the curved iron staircase, and the windows facing the cove. Over the following days, they spoke about ordinary things first. Then they spoke about the years between. Mara told him about London and the career she had built. Daniel told her about caring for his father and restoring old buildings. Neither pretended the past had been simple. Neither asked the other to become who they had been at 20. That was the beginning of their second chance. Not a return,
but a reconstruction. One evening, Mara found her grandmother's old garden journal. Between the planting notes was one sentence. Some doors remain closed because the people standing on either side are waiting for the other to knock. Mara read it 3 times. She did not forgive her grandmother immediately. Forgiveness was not a key that turned cleanly in a lock. It was a room one entered slowly, deciding what could be carried inside and what must remain outside. A week later, Mara asked for extended leave from her city job. She told Daniel she would stay through the autumn and restore the house as a small writing retreat. Daniel promised to repair the garden path and the roof. They worked together in the gentle rhythm of people learning each other again. Mara painted the upstairs rooms. Daniel repaired the windows. On rainy evenings, they sat in the kitchen with the old blue teacups between them. Sometimes they spoke about the future. Sometimes they allowed the future to remain quiet.
At the end of October, Mara walked to the lighthouse, carrying a small wooden box. Daniel was waiting near the railing, watching the last light fade across the water. She placed both old letters inside the box. Daniel asked if she was locking them away. Mara said she was keeping them somewhere safe, not because she wanted to live in the past, but because she did not want to forget how easily silence could speak for them. Daniel took her hand and said, "I love you. I loved you then, and I love you now. But I do not want us to spend the rest of our lives trying to repair what we lost. I want to build something new." Mara looked over the sea and said, "Then we start tomorrow." They walked back from the lighthouse together as evening gathered around them. The path was uneven, the wind was cold, and neither knew exactly what the future would bring. But they knew where they were going. Home was not always the place we returned to. Sometimes it was the person who finally told us the truth. Sometimes it was the courage to ask one more question. Sometimes it was a letter that arrived years too late and still found the right heart. Mara and Daniel could not recover the 8 years they had lost. They could not rewrite the station, the rain, or the silence that had separated them. But they could choose what came next. And so they did. Some letters arrive years late, but love knows how to wait. Thank you for listening to The Letter She Never Sent, an original romance story from Plot Echo Audio. Rest gently, and remember that the words left unsaid are sometimes the ones most worth speaking.